Hi, I'm Veronica. I'm a somatic yoga teacher, a Thai massage therapist, and your guide on the path towards self-healing. And this is a part of the series when I show you the cornerstones of my teaching and how you could apply them anytime, anywhere. And this time I'm going to look at the agency. So this means your choice in the context of a mindful movement is choosing wisely any given option. And we're going to look at that in a very simple practice. So you might want to have some pillows, as this might be your choice to use them at some point. Okay, so the first thing you could try is to settle in some seated position. And you might want to choose the support if you're struggling to feel the connection with the ground, if you're feeling that this is exerting a lot of effort for you to stay upright, or if your legs or hips are telling you that this is not the optimal way you'd like to sit. I could show you all the other options you have, but what you could do instead is to work it out yourself. Perhaps you need to sit higher, perhaps you need to have something underneath the thighs. You can experiment with it and find a place where eventually, when you do get seated, perhaps it's going to be with one leg outstretched because you have an injury in your knee or whatever else. You're going to be in a place where you feel the connection with the ground through your sit bones. And perhaps you could also spend a little bit of time making some little circles around your own axis so that you find that place where it's the least of effort to be upright when you're using the gravity. And that also includes the position of the head that might involve some micro movements there. So this is your starting position. And you could stay here for a couple of breaths, noticing. So you might start noticing which parts of the body speak to you the loudest today. And how much energy you have. You might notice how is your breath, and perhaps with what mental attitude, what mental state you're coming to the mat today. Okay. And then you can start exploring. Perhaps you could begin with bringing your shoulders up towards the ears and then releasing them away from the ears. You could begin with making some circles. And then again, it will be your choice whether you want to move perhaps just one arm at a time so that you could compare how is the right shoulder doing and how is the left shoulder doing. Maybe it's going to give you more feedback if you can focus just on one shoulder at a time. Maybe you want to move both. Or maybe you want to alternate that movement. There are no right or wrong decisions here. Those are the decisions that you take based on what the body is telling you. And it always might lead you somewhere else than I'm suggesting. So perhaps I'm talking about the movement of the shoulders, but at this stage you start feeling like some restriction or stuckness or stiffness in the side body, and you feel like exploring moving from the elbows. Or something totally different. Maybe you already did something else with your legs, because the legs, you realize that what you thought is going to be a stable, comfortable pose is far from that. And you already have them outstretched or in any other position. So you really don't need my instruction or my permission to make any changes to where you are or what you're doing right now. There's a bunch of options, and you take the one that is best for you at this moment. And take the responsibility for taking that decision. So perhaps if you have overestimated that you can sit here comfortably, you already start feeling the discomfort, or maybe even some cramp or whatever else that came from your decision to do something that was perhaps not optimal for your body. So that's what agency would be about. Okay, and after that little exploration for the upper body, you could perhaps add something for your head and neck. And then again, it is your history. You know what your neck can take. Or maybe you don't, because you never really tried. You made some assumptions that you could not move your head back. But if you move it not all the way back, but just tiny bit back, perhaps it's fine. So you give yourself that opportunity to explore. And if you go slow enough, and that would be my strongest suggestion for today, you are able to notice the reaction, the response from your body to whatever you are trying out. So once you felt that you've moved your upper body in whatever way it felt like needs it, and that might mean pausing my video and going on with it for quite a while longer. This is another option you have when you practice with a recorded session. Then you might want to stretch out your legs for a moment. So I could stretch them out and perhaps again explore something here. Maybe you want to move only your toes. You could check what are the options for the mobility of the ankles. You could rotate your legs in and out, starting from the hip socket. It's it gives you a lot of feedback at this stage. Where are potential restrictions and how you're doing today before you move on. And let's go for the all fours, where again, I'm not going to tell you where exactly you're going to place your hands or your knees, what angle your fingers should take. This is something, again, you can explore and check which one feels most stable for you, which one gives you more support, where you feel the least strain on your joints, where you feel most balanced, most supported by the ground. It might be something different from what you're used to, from your teachers told you. But the important thing is whether, for now, you feel that you have those weight distributed evenly over all four limbs, and that there is some sort of communication, connection between the top of the head and your tail, the very end of your spine. So the signs of disconnect would be some sort of hanging in the joints, some sagging, like perhaps in between the shoulder blades or somewhere in the lower back. But also that hypertension, that hyperactivity, kind of pushing away from the ground or really tensing up all the muscles, which you don't really need to do. The bones give you quite a lot of support, and there's usually just enough to have a tiny bit of engagement to make it sustainable and to make it feel light. Perhaps by this time, you again started feeling, for example, that your wrists are killing you. And that might have something to do with how is your relation to the ground, how you're giving the weight or receiving the support from the ground. Nevertheless, at this stage, you might have already reached the point when you're on your forearms, or you have changed the angle of your hands, and this is all okay. You have that right to keep on making micro movements, or maybe even coming in and out of the pose whenever you feel like. Okay, so let's just do that. Let's tuck the toes under and start shifting the weight back. And here again, you're the boss. You decide how much of that weight you can possibly take. How are all your joints and tissues reacting to that? So nobody said that one option is better than the other. There's no better and worse in a kind of general, universal sense. It's just better and worse for you at this moment. And you might want to stay here, and that already feels like there's quite a lot going on. There's lots of sensations. You can always ask yourself, what is happening? Am I feeling something? And is that discomfort that I'm feeling is in some way constructive, or it doesn't really give me anything else than just bothers me and doesn't bring me any benefit. So you could start playing with the idea of moving the knees away. And it's an interesting one because perhaps you might have something going on around the knees for now. So you know that if this is the case, it's not necessarily that you write it off entirely, that you're not giving it a chance, because there are plenty of options that you could still explore, but giving your joints, let's say, a little bit more space. And it might be perfectly all right. So that's why you have always the access to the props, which you can use in a creative way. And here you could start exploring shifting the weight between one foot and the other. Lots of things to notice. What happens to your foot, how you shift the weight, what happens in your hips. And there are plenty of options here as well. So again, entirely your choice, how much of the support you need right now, how ready you are to fall if you decide to use less support. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with falling either. Plenty of options within one pose. At any time, without me mentioning it, it might be that your body is telling you, wow, that was quite a lot, I need a break. And you can take the break and choose any other position to rest. Perhaps what was bothering you was that the legs were bent for quite a while and you want to stretch them out. Or perhaps you want to rest in something like a child's pose, any version of the child's pose. You might choose to be seated on your heels. Any place to rest
and become still for a moment to make sense of what happened is fine. So long as you stay with the sensations and keep on observing what is happening. And then why not? We could explore the possibility of coming into or towards the downward dog, but not as an ideal shape, a fixed structure, but rather of all the options that are within this pose to explore. And there are plenty. So I would recommend to start with a shorter stance, which might be far more supportive. So your hands much closer, perhaps than you used to, somewhere close to your knees, with finding that support from the ground when you feel that there is no sinking, no situation when you're putting all your weight, loading your joints. There are some visualization you could use to help you with that. Imagining, for example, the air bubble in the wrist joints or in all joints for that matter. And I would suggest a visualization that you have a tail like a monkey and you want to reach with that tail to the branch of a tree which is up and above you. So it's the tail that reaches and not that you push yourself away from the ground to get there. And there is no idea of taking any particular shape here. So the only thing you want to feel now is that you still have a freedom in your hands, that you're not loading your hands or wrists entirely, and that there is that communication, as if gentle tugging at both ends of the spine. So as if something was pulling you by the top of the head and by the tail at the same time. It might mean that your knees are very, very bent. There's nothing wrong with that. And you might already feel like, oof, there's some space you need to make in your groins, in your hips, and that might mean you want to stand much wider, or you might want to start turning your arms or your hands outwards. And at any stage, if you want to rest, well, what you could do is to walk backwards so that you end up in a forward fold, or bend the knees and come back to fours. So again, you can come in and out from that as many times as you wish. There is no point for you to kind of struggle within your down dog for too long. Once you're here, this is your main question, whether it feels light, supportive, and whether you have that communication with the whole spine. You might choose all kinds of situations. Maybe you bend your knees a lot and you find that nice length all alongside body. Maybe you want to start just wiggling your hips a tiny bit. Or perhaps you could shift both heels to one side and both heels to the other side and find some new length along the sides body. You might want to even walk your dog. Take it for a walk. See how it would be to walk forward and backward. There are no limits. There are no limits here. You will see if that long dog works better for you, if the short dog works better for you, if you want to be wide or narrow. This is your exploration of the pose, searching for a place where you're feeling most supported, where there is no tension around the shoulders and no painful sinking in your wrists. And it might take a while to find that place. Again, I suggest not to swap or change too quickly, but rather explore each of the options and check how it could be done. Let's go for forward fold for a moment. And as you're in a forward fold, again, your main point here is that it will be as supportive as possible. So you could have the weight right in the middle of each foot. You could check it a couple of times by shifting the weight forward and backward. You might want to have hands or fingertips on the floor, and that sometimes kind of gives extra support to your sacrum. Or you might have your arms completely loose. Check both options. Most of all, check that you're not doing anything to tense up your neck. So the neck is at the end of the spine. And again, you might prefer to stay still here. You might prefer to sway your entire torso right and left. You could even microbend one knee and the other and notice what does it do, or even draw the infinity sign with your hips. So you will decide at this stage whether you prefer to do this kind of explorative little micro movements, or the stillness is what you're up for. And then you could walk your hands forward and perhaps imagine that you still have that tail attached to the branch that is far behind you. And as you walk your hands forward, they still stay light. They still stay light. There's that length along the spine. And how far you would need to go forward to keep that lightness in the hands. And sometimes it's easier if you use blocks, 2 blocks underneath your hands. So that's another option. If you have blocks or books, you could do that too. And whenever you had enough, you can go back to your all fours. Notice again, how is that place, if you can be in a neutral place where you have the same support through all 4 limbs. Perhaps there's something that you feel like naturally drawn to do right now, whether it's a child's pose or sitting on the heels or some sort of movement. So there's always the choice between micro movements and exploration and between stillness. But from time to time, I definitely recommend you to come into a moment of perfect stillness. And this is for you to kind of absorb, let all the sensation pass, and let all this new information for the nervous system to be processed. And then we can make a really small, short kind of relaxation where again you have the choice. Where would you like to relax? You might want to lie on your front, as most of the things we did were kind of opening the back body. Maybe you feel like getting that support from the front. And even as you hear, that means you could stay with the forehead on your hands, or maybe with just one cheek resting on the ground. You might prefer to lie on your back. And if you're lying back, you could stay in constructive rest with your knees bent and feet on the mat. So long as you know that this is fully relaxing, that you don't need to tense your muscles in the legs to stay here comfortably. You could also use the support of pillows underneath the thighs and stretch out the legs. Perhaps you feel that your chin is pointing up to the ceiling and you need some little low support underneath the back of the head. Plenty of options here.
And it is going to be your body that's going to tell you which one is more restful. So that is the only question you ask yourself, not what would be good, what is better, but where my body feels more restful, and go for that one. Go for that one and give yourself time. Always give yourself that time to observe, to process anything that happened. My suggestion would be to allow your body to decide again how long you would like to stay in your relaxation pose. And as you're using the recording, you have that option of just clicking the pause button. If you feel like this is so good, I want to stay here longer. And then wait for that first sign from your body to tell you, I'm ready to move again. Perhaps you don't really need to stay too long, or maybe it makes you feel anxious or really restless, and it doesn't feel good at all to be in stillness. That's another option. Perhaps again, your body tells you that the option that you have chosen, that you thought would be most restful, actually brings you some sort of discomfort. And you need to change. Remember, you can always change. So I don't really need to spend more time here for now. So I will start coming out, but if this is not the case for you, just pause the video. And I'm gonna go now for something else that my body tells me to do. And this can be very different for you. I feel like massaging my back a little bit and allowing my legs to move in space. For you, it might be doing windshield wipers or maybe staying in stillness. Maybe something totally different. Or shaking all the limbs in the air. There are so many options. And in the end, just a moment of on the back, sorry, on the side in this fetal curl. And then it's nice to come back to that initial pose. Always return to that first point to notice, does it feel any different? Is this the same? That connection with the ground through the sit bones? Is it the same, that feeling of where you are in space, or how light you feel, or how difficult or effortless it is? So last moment of observing, taking note. Thank you very much for joining me for that little exploration. And whatever I chose today is just an example. So it's for you to understand there's always an option, there's always a choice, and you can play with it. You can make an informed choice when you practice. Please check the other videos that are the Cornerstone series. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I share a new video every Monday.